Hey, hey, hey. The Winter Soldier. Directed by Joe and Anthony Russo. Written by, let me get this right, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. Eminem, J and A, M2. Starring Chris Evans, Anthony Mackie, Sebastian Stan, Scarlett Johansson, Samuel L. Jackson, Robert Redford, and Kobe Smulders. Coming to a theatre near you in April 2014, a state of mind that I live in and have never left. Welcome back to another episode of whatever I called this thing that Into the Cineverse. Excuse me while I adjust. No. That looks good. There we go. Welcome back to Into the Cineverse, a series where I dissect popular movies that I personally enjoy and would recommend to anyone through the lens of, I forget, I don't remember. I've got it written down. Plot, characters, themes, ethos, logos, pathos, and anything to do with other things if I want to do them. So today we're doing The Winter Soldier. Excuse me if I'm a little bit manic. It's just how it's going to be. My favorite movie of all time. Not only the best Marvel movie, but also one of the greatest films of all time. And we'll go over why. I have a lot of things to say. This script that I have in front of me, so I'll be referring to it, was written for a podcast that I did with one of my friends. The podcast was called Marvels, and it was a shaky premise, and I'm not really proud of it, so I just ended up taking it down. One of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. And every time I watch it, and everything I learn about it, still to this day, makes me crazy. It makes me batshit insane. Content warnings for this episode are general blanket warnings for everything in this film, which includes stuff like torture. We'll go into it. Also, I want to talk about suicidal ideation, sexual assault and rape, World War II and Nazis, and we will discuss pedophilia, because it's all connected to what I want to talk about. We will also touch on the Vietnam War and the atrocities committed there by US soldiers. So, pretty heavy video today. If you want to skip it, that's totally fine. I don't want to trigger anybody, and I don't want anyone to go through listening to something that upsets them. But this is going to be a very interesting episode, and I am really proud of how much work I put into this, and how much I've thought about this, and how much I have to say, and what I have to say. So I hope you stick around, and I hope you have fun. You can try. I'm going to use the Save the Cat beat sheet to analyze the plot in this sense, which is a free resource that you can find online. I'll link it in the comments. Hey, I literally realized that I didn't even do that. Let's see if I can do it off the top of my head. Save the Cat. So the opening image is Anthony Mackie, soon to be known as the Falcon, Sam Wilson, running along the Washington Monument as the sun rises. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Captain America, Mr. Steve Rogers, my husband, he rocks up. It's a meet cute. It's really what it is. It's a meet cute. And where would a 70s style spy thriller about a Nazi secret organization infiltrating the government be without starting off with a meet cute? Like, that's just where you naturally begin, right? Gay rights slay. So the theme stated, page 5, minute 5. Could not tell you what happens in minute 5. I'm not that good. But the theme stated for this movie is something along the lines of Steve having no one and being unable to connect with anyone in the future. When Sam says, "It's your bed, isn't it? Your bed is too soft." Steve reiterates that. He's like, "Yeah, it's like sleeping on a marshmallow. Feel like I'm going to sink right to the floor." That's the first real incidence of connection that Steve has in the future. Incident in that moment where they talk about the bed. They talk about the bed, eh? Gay. Gay. So the setup to the story is when they infiltrate the Lemurian star, on which they find a program called Project Insight. What is it? Is it like a MacGuffin or something? I'm not entirely sure. Like an object or a piece of information that they're using to like set up the story, but it's not like super relevant that it's this specific thing. Like it could be anything. The catalyst, sometimes called the inciting incident. Yep. Trinity, hello. It disrupts your protagonist's status quo, but they're not ready to make that choice that catapults them into the story just yet. Fury gets shot by the Winter Soldier, and he has to go to the hospital, and then he dies, spoilers, and Steve isn't fully ready to jump in just yet, because as we see in a minute with the debate, so the debate is literally just a conversation, I guess, or like an expression of the character's doubts. With Steve, his doubts are very much internal. The debate would be the scene between Steve and Robert Redford's character. Pierce. Got it. They talk about how Fury led this rebellion and saved a bunch of people back in like the 70s or something. I can't remember what the date was. And one of them was Alexander Pierce's daughter. So Alexander Pierce is just saying that he trusts Fury implicitly. If he didn't trust Fury, then he wouldn't trust Steve with this information. And he kind of levels a kind of threat at Steve, being like, I'm going to find out who did this to my friend. Because Steve lied about why Fury was in his apartment where the Winter Soldier shot him, Pierce then sends S.H.I.E.L.D. agents after him. And at this point, Steve doesn't know who's friendly and who's not. So he busts out of there, runs away, gets on his motorcycle, zooms off. That's the break into 2. The A story rolls around the choice your protagonist made as Act 1 breaks into Act 2, but another subplot ensues, commonly a love story. Yeah, that's real funny. Like, as a shipper fandom person, someone who grew up in fandom and joined the Steve, Bucky, Captain America fandom in 2014 when this movie came out, because this movie came out, because I realized that, actually Steve and Bucky they're in love. Like, they're in love, and they have been since at least the 30s. Like, they're soulmates. I don't know what to tell you. And how I wrote a whole book about that, and you can find that linked in the description, which also got me cancelled, funnily enough. Got me cancelled by the 2020 Steve Bucky Twitter fandom. I can finally talk about that now. It caused me so much psychic pain for so long, but I finally wrote a post about it, and then I was like, actually, I can laugh about it now. God, it's so stupid. And the people who did that to me, I hope you don't sleep well at night. I really hope that you're haunted by the ways you treat other people. There is no traditional love story, and I would say that in that, like, you know, traditionally there is some sort of like expression of feelings, there is some sort of like resolution where the characters get together at the end, there's possibly a kiss, usually a kiss. Those don't happen in this. But there is a love story happening in this film, and it has to do with Bucky coming back from the dead. Let me do the hand gestures. That's the B story. Bucky, the Winter Soldier, is the B story. I think Brubaker, or possibly one of the Russos, or Marcus or McFeely, has said is that Steve is actually the Winter Soldier, because the Winter Soldier endures the harsh winter. So it's not a soldier born of winter, it's a soldier who has endured the winter, whereas Bucky is born of winter. Steve endures the winter. Looming presence in the background. Well, who is this shadowy figure? What does he want? You know, what's his end goal? We find out it's not the Winter Soldier who's the problem. He is, as they call him, an asset. Who puts the ass in asset? Sebastian Stan, bitch. Fun and games. I love the fun and games. It's like when Steve and Natasha go to the mall and they're like, they're at the Apple store with Apple guy Aaron. They're flirting in the car and they kiss. The midpoint turn. Oh, bitch. I love the midpoint turn. This is literally in every movie. Like, when you get to the midpoint turn, you're like, oh, yes, this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. The midpoint turn in this movie is when they go to Camp Lahai and they find the Swiss doctor. I said I could do this in my sleep, and I can. It's just that the minor details, like, I haven't watched this movie in a while, so shame on me.
I've been stalling, Captain.
I'll get it.
Admitted, it's better this way.
It'll take me a minute,
We
but I'll
are
get it.
both of us out of time.
I forget his name. He reveals what Project Insight is. It's a way for whatever is left over from Hydra to wipe out all threats to Hydra. This algorithm, oh my god, I forgot about that. So the algorithm has created profiles on certain people that are deemed threats to Hydra. It's gonna wipe them all out with the helicarriers that S.H.I.E.L.D. has so valiantly and joyfully been building to do what exactly? What were they going to do with them? Just let them get overrun by Nazis, apparently. So that's the midpoint turn. The midpoint turn is always a big twist that, like, changes the direction of the movie. Like, it just puts everything either into perspective or it shoots it in a different direction. So, always look out for the midpoint turn. It's so juicy. Oh my god, it's so juicy. Bad guys close in pages 55 to 75. This is where they have the fight in the streets of DC. I was about to say Chicago or Manhattan, but that was Avengers. And the Winter Soldier just comes on in. Oh my god, he is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, you talk about unstoppable force and immovable object. Babes, that's the best dynamic in an action movie. Of course, with a little bit of gay love built in for Pride Month. All is lost. In the film structure, the dire circumstances your protagonist endures will lead to an inevitable loss. I think in this instance, all is lost actually refers to everything Steve knows. He is a man without a country, and a country without a flag, and he's a flag without a pole, and he's a pole without a stripper, and he's a stripper without stripper heels. You know what I mean? He has no identity to cling to, which is why he's just going through the motions this whole movie, just being like, oh, I'll get through this, or I'll get through that, or I'll just keep pushing through. And it's like, babes, you can take some time off to, like, knit yourself a sweater or learn how to tap dance or whatever. Like, it's okay. Find a hobby, start a business, etc. You know, like, just spend some time with your own thoughts. You don't have to keep rushing into everything. You don't have to be constantly busy just because your ADHD is like... It's fine. Just because all your gay friends are partying on Christopher Street doesn't mean that you have to be partying all the time. The all is lost portion refers to Steve finding out Bucky is the Winter Soldier. While you think that should be the midpoint turn, it actually works so well because not only does it crumble everything Steve knows, it also provides a base for him to build himself back up. So basically every little bit of identity, pop culture knowledge, whatever person he's met in the intervening years that he's been alive, in the three years, I think, has crumbled just to nothing. It's just like ground floor now. He's just rock bottom. And so now he gets to build himself back up with pieces of his old life instead of just being like, well, there's nothing for me back there and I have to let go of everything because everything I know is gone and Peggy's forgetting me. I have no other friends and etc. Like, where were the Howling Commandos? Peggy Carter, where are the Howling Commandos? Where are they? I would love to have seen Steve hanging out with like Jim Morita's granddaughters or something. All is lost really refers to Steve losing everything he thought he knew. And it also refers to him finally losing Bucky. But then it's also like, well, he hasn't lost Bucky. But has he? But he hasn't. But has he? You know. So there's a real conundrum right there. So the Dark Night of the Soul for the Winter Soldier is when Steve and Bucky are fighting on the helicarrier, and Steve is trying to put the last chip in so that he can divert the targets of the helicarrier. He puts the chip in, Maria diverts the guns and starts blowing up the helicarriers. Bucky is still sort of brainwashed. He's still like trying to kill Steve, even though Hydra's dead, it's over. Like, I don't think at this point there is even any use for Bucky, because this was his last mission. It was his last mission. This was the thing that they were training him for, to kill Steve Rogers. Best friend brainwashed into killing him. Oh my god, this whole movie, even just thinking about it, makes me so emotional. It's a perfect movie. It's perfect. The Dark Night of the Soul is the part where Bucky is literally beating the shit out of Steve. Like, his face would be mashed potato. Like, it would be not even recognizable. And it gets to the point where, oh my god, I got so emotional just thinking about it. I'm normal. I'm a normal guy. Bucky, like, is beating Steve up. And then he goes, oh wait, it's his left hand. He goes like, you're my mission. And then Steve says the infamous line, I'm with you till the end of the line. Which is a callback to earlier in the movie where Bucky says that to Steve in a flashback. When I tell you, it still makes me sob like a little baby. Or like I usually sob. I sob a lot. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about me. You don't know. No, it's okay. It's okay. I told you not to worry about me. It's okay. Okay, now I'm comforting you. Okay, please just stop. Just stop. It gets me in a way few other things do. Have you ever had a bond with someone so strong that 70 years later, it broke the conditioning that you had been put through, the brainwashing you had been put through, and snaps you out of it to the point that you remember who you are and that you're a person? Yeah. I don't think I could possibly do this movie justice. I just don't think. So the break into 3 is Steve saying, I'm with you till the end of the line. And the finale is the final act. Steve wakes up in the hospital. Sam is there. Trouble Man is playing. Texas Death and Trouble. They go to the cemetery. Natasha gives Steve the file, Bucky's file. Fury says, because he's alive again, faked his death. He faked his death. He wasn't really dead. He says, I could use someone to help me try and track down the rest of Hydra. Steve says, no, there's something I got to do first. And then, Fury asks Sam, he's like, no. He says, I'm more of a soldier than a spy, which is really sweet. It really shows where Sam's loyalties lie. At this point, he's known Steve for possibly 4 days. The Russos jokingly referred to this film as 3 Days of Steve Rogers after the film 3 Days of the Condor, which is a very bad film. But it has Robert Redford in it as the main character. So it's like, there's a cute little thing where it's like 3 Days of the Condor, 3 Days of Steve Rogers, Robert Redford in both of them. You know, it's cute. Final image is when Steve and Sam are talking about going to find Bucky. And Steve says, you don't have to come with me. And Sam says, I know. When do we start? And it's like this perfect mirror image of Sam and Steve at the beginning, where Steve says, on your left. Oh my God. Okay, get it, don't get it twisted. They're in love too. Okay, Steve has a lot of love. We're all for polyamory in this house. So, oh my God, it's just a perfect film. It's just a perfect, like, really the only 3 things I would say that would make it even more perfect, like 104% perfect, is more Bucky, better editing on the fight scenes, especially in the DC streets scene where we find out that the Winter Soldier is Bucky, and just being longer. Like, just make it a 4-hour movie. Like, it's perfect. The only thing that would make it more perfect is more of it. I'm actually going to have to look at my notes because I didn't finish this script. So like I was saying, I wrote this script that I'm reading now for a podcast episode. And when I started writing this script, before I actually watched the film again, I just started writing notes. There were 4 pages of notes. Now there are 14 pages. So this is really the first movie in the MCU with like capital T themes. It is the first movie that really goes into a character's psyche and explores his world in a really in-depth, vibrant, which is funny because the movie is very grey, haunting way. Steve Rogers is a lonely, sad man. He's in pain. He has lost everyone he loves, or is in the process of losing everyone he loves. He's trying to connect with people in a world he doesn't understand. And he's just trying to get by. You know, he doesn't know what he wants. Sam literally asks him, what do you want to do? And Steve just goes, don't know. So the themes that this movie explores are like loss and grief, memory and forgetting, the psychological impacts of war, loneliness, the loss of self, loss of agency, capitalism, corporatism, automation, global surveillance, the threat of emerging technologies, the devaluing of humanity as it is replaced with machines, and like so much more. Like, the more you dig into this movie, the more there is. It is. And I have to point out that it was nominated for an Academy Award. I don't talk too much about it, but this is something that I'm always aware of, is that Bucky is disabled, but he is played by a non-disabled person, Sebastian Stan. In this instance, I would say this is one of the few instances where I don't know if the movie makers could have gotten someone who was missing an arm to play this role, because of the technology at the time. I mean, honestly, you can do anything with like special effects and a little bit of movie magic, but it's obviously not something that they were thinking of when they filmed or cast the first Avenger. If someone wants to talk about this in depth or has written an article on this, like, I would love to hear thoughts on like whether you think it is another form of ableism in that they chose a non-disabled actor to play a disabled character. Like, I'm all for saying that, and I'm all for saying no, it's okay in this instance, but you know, it's just something that I'm always thinking about because there are just so few roles for disabled people in media. And if we look at an instance like Chadwick Boseman, who purposefully kept his cancer diagnosis under wraps because he knew that he would not get roles. Like, there is absolutely no way that they would have cast him as Black Panther if, I'm not sure if he had cancer at that time, but if he did have cancer and he told them that, there is absolutely no way he would have gotten that role. And it's because of the ableism in Hollywood. No one wants to take a chance on a disabled actor, even for playing a disabled character. Like what we've got, Hugh Laurie in House, Eddie Redmayne as Stephen Hawking, that piece of shit Sean Penn as I Am Sam. Speaking as a trans person, this is my personal opinion, casting a non-disabled actor to play a disabled role has the same effect and is just as damaging to the disabled community as casting a non-trans actor to play a trans character. That may be a wild thing for me to say, but I was saying the same thing about how ableism is just as bad as sexism, misogyny, racism, homophobia, etc. Back in 2019, and then guess what happened? The fucking pandemic happened, and millions of people that got COVID and then got long COVID realized, oh shit, actually, disability is a real thing, and maybe we should talk about it, and maybe we should, think about it. And the ones who don't think about that are ableist. You're just straight up ableist if you don't consider disabled people. And if this is the first time you're thinking about this, I want you to think real hard about who you're following online, whose conversations are you listening to, whose voices are you listening to, whose are you promoting, whose are you backing, whose are you supporting, who are you donating to, who has money and is able to say these things, who doesn't have money and is still saying these things. Amani Barbarin is really good. She is a disability rights activist and she is incredible. And she just makes TikToks all day about how people just say the most ableist shit online and get away with it. Moving on, I had a bunch of notes about characters. I'll probably only talk about Sam, Steve, and Bucky in this because they're the ones that I have the most notes on. Sam is completely devoid of that horrible phrase, toxic masculinity. Just straight off the bat, he is just charming, lovely guy who immediately wants to get into bed with Captain America. Who dain't, honestly, but his entire job is talking about feelings and talking about feeling your feelings. The second scene we see him in, he's leading a therapy group. I just love this guy. Oh my god, I just love this guy so much. So he's completely devoid of the rah-rah, gung-ho, muscle, whatever, jarhead bullshit that a lot of male characters in action movies are subject to. But specifically, jarheads or army grunts or whatever, Air Force members. And so it's a real subversion. While he says he's a soldier, he's not just a soldier. He's a friend. And he's a friend that Steve needs in that moment, in this movie. Steve needs him more than Sam ever needs any of this bullshit. And, lesser writers would have projected a lot of machismo and violence and aggression onto him, specifically as a black man, because this is a topic that comes up, a racist trope that comes up often is that the black male character in any ensemble cast is aggressive and mean. I've read a lot of Stitch's media mix, and they talk about the perception of and the representation of black characters in media. And they talk about Captain America particularly. So I have read a little bit about Sam's characterization. Typically what I saw in the fandom, not specifically at the time, but in the ensuing years, was that people were generally really happy with Sam's characterization, and I'm happy with it. I think he's a wonderful character. He's such a lovely guy, and I think that just because he's a happy guy and he's nice to be around and he's a good friend doesn't mean that he can't have depth. I don't think they give him obviously as much narrative depth as, say, Black Widow, who is a previously established character, or Bucky, who is the centerpiece of the film. But I think they do give him enough backstory to round him out as a character. However, his role does really exist to be Captain America's right-hand man. Right hand? He's on his left. So Steve was on his left. So Sam would be on Steve's right. Yeah, right-hand man. I got it. I got it right. I got it right. It was a little unfortunate that Sam was constantly relegated to side character. He does get his due in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but that in itself is so problematic. It's like, I mean, I loved Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I loved Bucky in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I loved Sam in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Did not love Falcon and the Winter Soldier, mostly because it's made by 3 white people who are talking in depth about issues that solely affect African Americans, specifically war veterans, and none of those people fit that category. I'll talk more about it when I actually do the Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode of Into the Cineverse. Sam is not seen as aggressive or an aggressor at all. Even when he's fighting actual Nazis, he's on the defensive. So he is getting shot at, he's getting kicked off planes, he's fleeing for his fucking life as a helicarrier crashes into the building he's currently in. But you can't take him out of the story. Like, if you took him out of the story, you would have to scramble to fill the void that he leaves. He is as integral to this story as Natasha, as Fury, as Pierce, as Bucky. Like, all of these pieces work together to create this whole W-H-O-L-E. Sam is the first person that Steve opens up to in any capacity. We don't know anything about him except the things that Tony says in The Avengers, because Joss Whedon is a hack and he doesn't know Captain America like I do. He doesn't know Steve like I do. And I know Steve. You don't know Steve. Because Steve Rogers is my best friend and you just don't know him. And the scene, oh my god, this the first scene where they actually interact, which is the second, little scenes where Sam is sitting down and Steve helps him up and they just have a little chat. It's masterful. It's so wonderful. It's like, Steve has obviously been eyeing this cute guy off for a couple weeks now, memorized Sam's running route. So he follows him, laps him like 3 times. The conversation goes something like Sam saying, you must miss the good old days, and Steve saying, food's a lot better, ha ha ha, not I'm traumatized from years of war and I miss my best friend desperately and everyone I know was either dead or forgetting me. Not first date kind of talk. You don't want to bring out all your vulnerabilities on the first date, even with Sam Wilson, who is very understanding. And probably a perfect gentleman, let's be real, he's a perfect gentleman. Steve says, I'll see you around, and he turns to leave, and then Sam says, it's your bed, isn't it? It's too soft. And then that just instant, that click of oh, he gets it. Oh my god, he gets it. That moment of connection, right? They've already opened up about their interests. Steve's been talking about the internet, reading the internet. And then Sam has opened up about, mentioned something that he likes, which is the Trouble Man soundtrack by Marvin Gaye. And then the moment where they're like, the bed, it's your bed. It's so simple. They just have this little moment, and then Natasha turns up and Steve says bye, and Sam says, anytime you want to come by the VA and make me look good in front of the cute girl at the front desk or something, it's like an open invitation for Steve to join his therapy group. He wants Steve to come by and see the therapy, which he does. See Sam, giving therapy to these traumatized veterans, and realize that he's not as alone as he thinks he is. There are other people who have suffered similar traumatic events as Steve. So it's really very smart in that Sam is just and he just delivers it so, oh my god, Anthony Mackie, sir. Oh my god. I will never get over how good Anthony Mackie is at playing Sam Wilson. He's just good at everything he does, but he's just absolutely brilliant at Sam. Everybody in this, okay, well, I have my issues with Scarlett Johansson, but unfortunately, I have always liked her acting, and I've always liked the roles that she's picked. And her chemistry with Chris Evans, because they've known each other so long, is really good. They play off each other really well. And I find that one of the problems with Scarlett Johansson's acting is that she's only as good as the script she's given. Fortunately, this is a brilliant script, so she's really good in this film. That aside, she is a garbage person, and I hope she rots in hell. Love ya. So they do a lot in this film to emphasize that the military causes war and needless deaths in order to bring about peace and prosperity, which is the whole ethos of what Hydra is trying to do with Project Insight. And it's also the same propaganda that the US military has been preaching this entire time. You know, World War II brought about a boom in economic growth for America because they were building bombs, they were building missiles, they were building war instruments, you know, guns, etc. Obviously, when your entire economy is built around war, you want to keep that going because it's a good cash grab. It's like if you're sponsored by Amazon, then Amazon's what you're gonna keep peddling, you know, and to keep that up, to keep people signing up to the military. I actually watched this TikTok, which was like some guy, some jarhead, I think, or some army grunt, was like talking to his platoon, and he was just filming them all, and he's like, you know, so-and-so, why did you join the army? Why did you join the army? Why did you join the army? And like, I think he did this to about 10 people, and like 7 of them said, I don't know. One was like, because I'm a fucking idiot. And another one was like, money. And like, that's it. It's like, America just has to keep peddling this lie that it brings about peace, and that war brings about peace and prosperity at the expense of millions of lives, because otherwise why would people keep signing up? And they don't know. The military owns at least part of the film industry in Hollywood, because you see movies like Top Gun, Captain Marvel, you know, all these war movies that are just part of the propaganda machine. And this film directly criticizes it by saying, actually, that's what the bad guys are saying in this film. It's like, how did they sneak that one in, I wonder? But I really would have liked to see Sam kind of enforce a little bit more that he left the military because of the military-industrial complex, and how damaging it is, not just on a global scale, but also on a personal, individual level, because it personally affected him in that his best friend Riley, who is a blonde hunk of muscle, died in combat. It's like horrible to think about that. And that is also another way that Sam and Steve connect, in that both their best friends, who they were clearly in love with, just a side note, in case you didn't get that, they're both clearly in love with their partners. Yeah. And then now they're in love with each other. So I would have loved him to specifically criticize the military-industrial complex as a whole, and not just say, oh, it was sad that my friend died, but this is a casualty of war or whatever. Like, he didn't say that, but it is kind of implied that he took that more personally than as like, well, Riley was actually a victim of a systematic institution who don't care about human lives. They just don't. They just don't care. They're just all about money. The American military budget is in the trillions. Food service workers are getting paid under $7 an hour. And because the comics draw directly from the Winter Soldier investigation, it's not specifically commented on in this film. And I think that they wanted to leave that as like a little Easter egg, like, oh, read the comics. And then once you go to the comics, you find out about what Ed Brubaker was talking about when he called it the Winter Soldier. They were either not as interested as I am in criticizing the military, or they knew they couldn't get away with it. But what they did get away with, I'm talking about like the filmmakers, what they did get away with is incredible. It's incredible for a Marvel movie to talk about this. And we see in Black Panther, unfortunately, another really good Marvel movie, like top 4. We see that they actually promote fraternizing, I guess, with the CIA agent or whatever it is, the SHIELD agent or whatever he's from, Martin Freeman, horrible gremlin of a man. And you just know they're going to put Martin Freeman in a fucking Doctor Strange movie. Oh, it's going to be 2011 all over again. I have so many headaches. But they do posit Hydra as like an external parasite that burrows into the military-industrial system in order to sow chaos and wreak havoc. Whereas in real life, the American military-industrial system does that openly, and they don't care how they're seen. I mean, sure, there are classified military documents, but there are also whistleblowers. Thank God for Chelsea Manning. Oh, Queen. Mikel Larinaga wrote a tweet. America has once again proven that a pile of dead bodies is no cause for change, and the fact that you're not sure which issue I'm talking about speaks to the depths of that problem. This was written in 2020, at the height of the pandemic. And the Winter Soldier is saying that Hydra is behind the chaos and disorder of the world, when in fact, for a lot of countries, the perpetrator of this chaos and violence is the US military and the US government. So I do think that the Marvel movies do a real disservice to the black characters in them, like Maria Rambeau, Sam Wilson, and the character who Sam meets in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Fury, Rhodey, Heimdall, and even queer characters like Bucky, Maria Rambeau, Maria Hill, and Carol, they all have this military history, and I think it does a real disservice, especially to the African-American characters who, like, they're just not seen to have any, like, interests or backgrounds outside of, like, the service that they give to America, and then it's like they have to give that up because it's not, one, it's not sustainable, and two, it almost kills them. Actually really does a very bad disservice. In this film, there are a lot of parallels between Sam and Steve, but that just serves to make them better friends, really, better lovers. More soulmates, because you can have more than one soulmate. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say. So, Steve. Steve. He is reckless to the point of suicidal. He, as I was saying before, does not have much of an identity outside of being a soldier, serving a country, serving a flag. When he says, "I'm always honest," like, Steve, you bold-faced lied to the American military 5 times before you were allowed in. Like, you are not honest. I'm sorry. You are the alt-right agitator. You are the guy. So it just wouldn't be a Steve Rogers-led film if he wasn't sacrificing his life for the greater good. But again, it's not for the greater good. It's for Bucky. Like, in the first movie, he is so distraught at Bucky's death, or what he assumes to be Bucky's death. Well, we all assume to be Bucky's death. That he attacks a Hydra base in the middle of the day. Just an all-out attack. He then pilots a plane into the ocean. They even brought this up in Endgame, where Rhodey was like, "Why don't you just jump out?" And Steve is just standing there like, you know why he didn't jump out? Because he was very depressive about his death. He just lost the love of his life. One of the loves of his life. Like, and there's just no heterosexual way they could have framed that, because the entire 3 movies of the Captain America trilogy revolve around the love story of Bucky Barnes and Steve Rogers. They just revolve around that. There is, at the core of these movies, is Bucky and Steve's love for each other. That is what draws them together over and over, and it's this, like, constant push and pull of, like, well, we want them to be together and the characters want to be together, but the narrative is constantly pulling them apart. But at the core of these films is this love. I'm screaming. Steve would rather die than live in a world where Bucky doesn't recognize him. I have so many points. I don't want to go through them all. Bucky is my best friend, and I care him. Didn't know how to say it anymore. Bucky is my best friend, and I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him. There have been articles that draw parallels to this being a rape narrative, but it's like, yeah, that stuff happens to men as well. Duh. So Bucky is not female coded. He's just a guy who had to go through some stuff that no one should go through. Cal Jeffrey Gooden at The Advocate says that cis men are taught that they can be loud and take up space, that masculinity equals power, and they can express that as aggressively as they like. So you could draw a trans narrative in this as well. It's interesting because Bucky is shown to be powerful when he's muzzled and silenced, but powerless in the scene where he's like in the bank vault, he's got no shirt on, surrounded by men with guns. He's in a very vulnerable position. He's literally being injected with benzos and he's being tortured. And if you want to draw like a trans narrative into that, you can. I'm not going to do it for this, but with this Cal Jeffrey Gooden quote in mind. So the comics are quite different from the films, obviously. But in the comics, Bucky is like a 14-year-old kid when he joins the war, and Steve is also 18 years old. Bucky is a 14-year-old kid, and he was originally used as like a parable kind of thing to combat the Hitler Youth that was happening at the time and the propaganda behind that, who could do all these really nasty things that Steve couldn't do because he was the shining beacon of hope, whereas Bucky was just this little kid that no one noticed. And it's really bad to think about Bucky being imprisoned and tortured by Hydra for decades and growing up in between cryo-freeze sessions. If you remember the Hydra trash party, you get a senior citizens discount and also a gun to play Russian roulette with on the house. The part where Bucky, in a way, lets them wipe his mind, the choice is between being violated or being dead. There is no choice. That scene is so powerful, and Sebastian Stan plays it with such nuance and care. And it's so haunting to think about how this man went from just an average guy to being Steve Rogers' best friend, Captain America's best friend, in love with the shining hope of America, to falling off a cliff, to being the one who brings Steve Rogers down. And he doesn't even know it. I am heartbroken every day I think about Bucky. But he's fine now. He's alive and hanging out with Sam on Sam's boat. I've brought up this point many times in many different like books, podcasts, etc., etc. Bucky only makes one choice per film, and in the first one, I can't even remember what it is. It's like to follow Steve. It's like to follow Steve, I think, is that choice. But in this film, the choice he makes is to save Steve. And it's like, oh, buddy. Oh, God, let's finally move on. Okay, themes. Yeah, so loss and grief obviously is very evident in the fact that Bucky died, but also Steve is also mourning, Peggy losing her memory, so loss of memory. She's the only one who remembers Steve, and if she doesn't remember Steve, how is he supposed to remember himself? yeah, I think I kind of just ran through them, and I think I've pretty much talked about them. Let's talk about ethos, the characteristic spirit as manifested by attitudes and aspirations. So again, I've talked about how it's a critique of the industrial military complex. I've said that phrase so often. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't actually mean anything. How it's a critique of the American military, and by extension, the American government. You can't boil it down, because there are just so many things you could say. Like, the characteristic spirit is like, I don't know, never give up. The Winter Soldier endures. Steve Rogers endures because he is the Winter Soldier. Like, well, is love the enduring thing? Is love enduring, or do we endure love? It's just like the questions that you can raise from this movie just go on and on. It never stops. The analysis never stops. And I, for one, am very happy about that, because I love analysis, as you can tell. Honestly, ethos. What are we saying about this movie? I don't even know. I just talked for like an hour and a half. How can you condense that? How can you condense that to one sentence? Try, please, sum this movie up. Sum everything about this movie up. Sum up the ethos. Please write in the comments the ethos of this film. What is the characteristic spirit as manifested by attitudes and aspirations of this film? Would love to know people's takes on this. So, Logos, the principle of reason and judgment. Steve, as the main character, is supposed to be the actor of reason and judgment. He judges and he acts accordingly. But as we've seen, his judgment is very skewed, and that's fine, because, that's personal growth. He thought that Pierce and S.H.I.E.L.D. were worth fighting for, worth working for. And then we find out that actually they're just a part of a system that wants to destroy everything he originally fought for. So he can't trust them. He trusts Sam, and he trusts Natasha, and Steve's trust issues and Natasha's trust issues cancel each other out. And he trusts Fury, and, well, he has to trust Fury. And he's put in a position where he must trust Fury and Maria by extension. But he chooses to trust Sam. He chooses to go with Natasha to Sam's house, at which they have a conversation where they talk about how they would save each other's lives. I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up. Where they would save each other's lives. Where they now trust each other implicitly. That is growth. That is character development. Oh my goosies. I'm not going to show you my arms because I haven't shaved them in a while. Goosies. But the principle of reason and judgment with this movie, I think it's more about trusting your gut, as Steve is someone who has always trusted his gut above obeying authority blindly. And it works out for him, in the sense that he does what he sets out to do. He achieves his goals, which are bringing down Hydra or destroying S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, he at least tries to bring down Hydra in the first one, and he kind of succeeds. Sort of, not really. Poor Steve. I think it also has a lot to do with, as I said, at the core of this movie, love. Love is at the core of this movie. So the principle of reason and judgment is that love kind of defies reason and judgment. By all means, Steve should not still be in love with the guy who's trying to kill him. And yet he is. All reason says, do not let your face get pummeled into mashed potato by a guy trying to kill you. And yet there he is, saying, I still love you and I will always love you. I'm going to cry. Moving on. Pathos, a quality that evokes pity or sadness. But, again, how I'm choosing to interpret pathos is the qualities that make us feel sympathy, but not only that, empathy. So, who do we at first feel sad for? But then, who do we feel for in the sense that we can put ourselves in their shoes? I wouldn't say that everyone has found a love as deep and profound as Steve and Bucky's, because I would say that's rare, I mean, this is the very fact that they are super soldiers and they have survived being frozen in ice for 70 years. That's kind of not typical, I would say. But you know, like, am I going to sit here and say that the love I have for my wife and the love I share with my wife is, oh my God, I am going to cry. She's sitting right there. Is as profound as, oh, I am literally crying. Oh no. Oh. So again, it's like, oh. I think we can say that we feel sympathy for Steve having gone through a war and been traumatized through 2 years of battle. And we can similarly say we sympathize with Sam having gone through, what was it, 2 tours, I think, which is like, as far as I'm aware, I think at the time, tours were 4 months. It's a long time to be in combat. Like, sure, Steve was there for 2 years, but he's literally a super soldier. We can feel empathy for them having lost someone. I would say that if you're probably over the age of 20, 25, you have probably lost someone close to you, like a family member or a friend, a grandparent, you know, someone who you really love, just like unconditionally. You just unconditionally love them. You can empathize with that loss that both Steve and Sam suffered. Again, we can say that we can empathize with Bucky having a bad day. Oh no, that's so bad. But we can't necessarily empathize with having gone through the experience of being psychologically and physically and, you know, mentally, emotionally, etc., possibly more tortured for that long. Like, even for a day, you know, I don't think many people could empathize with that. But there definitely are some people who could. I am very sorry that happens to anyone. There's just no words. So this is absolutely one of the most profound love stories ever told. When I was writing this, I was trying to think of examples of stories that were similar, you know, in modern media, and it really takes a lot of skill to be able to craft a long-form narrative, like across several different films. Like, I would even consider Infinity War and Endgame to have continued this narrative in very different ways of love between two characters, regardless of their ethnicity, their nationality, their religious affiliation, their sexuality, their gender, etc. So it is really hard to craft a convincing love story anyway. It just really is. But it helps that in this instance, Steve and Bucky are, beneath it all, really good friends. They're just really good friends. They're also consistently ranked number 1 in those which MCU pairing is the most romantic. Like, literally, I wrote this in 2020 and I was going through, like, so many of them and just every single one was like, oh yeah, the most romantic pairing, Steve Bucky. And the second one was, like, Steve Peggy, and that was, like, after Endgame came out. It's like, bro, you can't... She doesn't even get any lines in that film. Like, how is that romantic? Oh, Jesus. Ugh. And so I was trying to think of pairings that I thought were as profound, and the first one that came to mind was, of course, Dean and Cass from Supernatural, which I talk about on this channel because I'm a mentally unwell person. I'm just a mentally unwell person, and I should be shot like a dog. Do people still write Steve Bucky? Like, are they still writing that? I haven't checked in on the fandom since they cancelled me. Steve and Bucky might actually be the second most written, most tagged work on AO3. Okay, put your prejudice about AO3 aside. I don't care. Don't come for me. Yeah, obviously Dean and Cass from Supernatural. I thought Lydia and Allison from Teen Wolf, like, they just hits different, you know, just like at this time, 2020, I would have said Eve and Villanelle. Please refer to my video entitled Eve Pilastri is the Villain of Killing Eve, because I do not feel that way anymore. Do not empathize with the people who think that Villanelle and Eve should be together. I also just want to point out that the Russos directed You, Me, and Dupree. Not seriously depresses. No, I'm kidding. Depresses me. Oh, I can't even say that joke. It's so bad. I really hate that they directed my favorite movie. Like, I guarantee you Catherine Hardwicke would have done a better job. There you have it. The Winter Soldier, directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, who have all the personality of a wet paper bag, that managed to pull this off. Catherine Hardwicke, please don't ever direct an MCU film. Please just collect your Twilight dollars and get the fuck out. I was about to call it a podcast. 2 hours into this video, we are getting to the good stuff. I have called this section the Hollywood Illuminati, or Aubigney Pops Off. Operation Paperclip that they talk about in the film, specifically in that scene in the bunker at Camp Lehigh, was real. SHIELD and the CIA did actually recruit German scientists. They took all the leading German scientists who were involved with the Holocaust and the concentration camps. They brought them over to America, gave them houses and new names and salaries, and said, let's make some magic, babes. And the CIA used this Nazi knowledge to experiment on people. An audiobook I listened to called Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobsen. Dry, but good. Like, every other sentence, I was like, fucking Nazis, fucking Nazis, fucking Nazis, you know. But it's really interesting. Yeah, and all of these, like, Nazi scientists were just absolved by the US government because the CIA recruited them. What was I saying about the American military and the American military intelligence organizations being the root of all evil? Did I say that? Should I say it now? Should I say it again? So Operation Paperclip gave way to Operation Bluebird and MK Ultra. And MK Ultra was so fun, so delicious. It was basically mind control using abuse and psychotropic drugs, psychic driving, which is intensive electric treatment and implanting new ideas, which is brainwashing, sleep treatment and electric shocks while asleep, and also playing tapes with messages on them. They also tried to induce amnesia using LSD. And the occult Nazi regime, which was referenced in the first Avenger with Schmidt, how his ideas were too wild for Hitler. No, they weren't. They were embraced by Hitler and the Nazi Party and the followers of the Nazi Party, and it's also happening in Hollywood. So this is like my QAnon theory, whatever that thing is called, Into the Dark Shadows or something, documentary that I watched on YouTube and was like, I can't believe this is happening. Why isn't anyone talking about it? Well, maybe it's not happening, but maybe it is. Do we know for certain? Who's just... What I do know is that Michael A. Aquino, a disciple of Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, and the head of the Temple of Set, is a member of AFIO, Association of Former Intelligence Officers, and the intelligence community. In some of his videos, he talks about the mind war, which is using Satanist techniques and tools to indoctrinate, control, and manipulate people. He brags about having Nazi paraphernalia, and 50 people have accused him of pedophilia. As far as I'm aware, nothing's been done about it, but again, I haven't really checked since 2020. Something could have changed. It's fucking terrifying. Aquino also says enemy populations could be subdued by inflicting psychological terror and feelings of imminent destruction by using psychotropic weapons that influence the mind, which is directly lifted from Nazi scientists. This is what happened to Bucky. Literally, Hydra is in S.H.I.E.L.D. So at first I was like, well, they could have gone a bit more ham on that, and it's like, they did. They went ham. They snuck this in to a Marvel movie. This is like some Eyes Wide Shut shit. They killed Stanley Kubrick for that. For Eyes Wide Shut. I would be very careful if I was them. But then, they just stuck this in a fucking Marvel movie. Oh my god. directly calling out the CIA and the media machine. Literally, the program is called the algorithm. What controls everything we see on social media? Algorithms. Like, I know you're going to be sitting here thinking, oh, wow, aubigney, it's so deep. So deep. Wow, you just had your mind blown by a Captain America movie? Yes, I did. Not only is Captain America all about love, it's all about bringing down the military intelligence machine. And if you don't see that, like, I can't help you. This is the best movie ever made. It's changed my mind. It's not one of the best movies ever made. It is the best movie ever made. Specifically because it doesn't have Tom Cruise in it. And not only is this movie directly criticizing the CIA, the FBI, the American military, the American government, it's also told through a heartbreaking and haunting and beautiful love story. How do you do that? Masterful story. So let's talk about the Winter Soldier investigation. Thomas Paine. So Thomas Paine wrote this thesis called Crisis, and in it he says, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of this country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." So the Winter Soldier investigation delved into the atrocities that were committed by US soldiers in Vietnam in the Vietnam War. And it also sought justice for the victims and also for the soldiers who committed these acts. The 60s project says that it was intended to shed light on what the US military was doing under the guise of following orders in order to establish a pattern of terror, torture, and assassination. So if you ever hear that shit like, oh, well, I was just following orders. People die when you just follow orders. That's what happens. People get tortured, they get abused, they lose their lives when you just follow orders. It's not enough. It's not enough. And the system that the American government has trapped its people in, to the point where it's like the only way you can earn any money is by being a soldier or working for Amazon, where you don't get bathroom breaks. Like, it's not really a choice, is it? It's not really a choice. It's a system that you're trapped in. So, being like, I was just following orders is not enough, but also being trapped in a system that you can't get out of is also not good. It's a tricky situation. I am not the one to pass the judgment, the logos on that. The investigation spanned 3 days from January 31st to February 2nd, 1971, and incorporated all these soldiers and higher-ups from the army and covered ecological effects such as the Vietnamese population and the social effects of being at war with the United States. So prisoners of war, racism, and specific infantries, which included information about the treatment of soldiers, civilians, and prisoners. I'm probably just going to read off my notes from here because I wrote them out really well. As Vietnam War veteran William F. Crandall, who helped start the Winter Soldier investigation, says, "What we learned as a nation from the Winter Soldier investigation is that atrocities result from unchecked power, which is not limited to dictatorships. The lesson of the Winter Soldier is one Tom Paine understood: never turn your back on authority." And that is from the Winter Soldier side. So Bucky embodies the atrocities that America committed through most of the last century. He symbolizes the damage that was not just done to Japan, Vietnam, and Russia throughout this period, but also the damage that was inflicted upon American civilians who were just following orders and the American psyche, as we saw throughout the riots and the protests against the Vietnam War, the protests against the Iraq War. Just honestly, pick up a history book. Please, for the love of God, pick up a history book. Oh my God, you can find some great ones on Libby. So Bucky and Steve are opposites. The phrase that comes to mind is von Strucker, I think his name is, in the after credits of Age of Ultron, where he says, Hydra shields two sides of the same coin that is no longer in currency. That's Shield, Hydra, Steve, Bucky, two sides of the same coin. They balance each other out. They need each other to survive. Not Shield and Hydra, I don't care about them, but Steve and Bucky need each other to survive. While Steve kind of toils in the present, recalling the past and unable to look into the future, Bucky is like down in the mud doing the dirty work that Hydra wants him to do, the same as he did the dirty work that the American military wanted him to do in both the comics and the first film as well, the first Avenger. So Bucky is really doing, as Pierce says, the work that needs to be done in order to create a better and new society. And he didn't choose it, and he didn't want it, and it's not his choice, and he had no agency. He's literally like following orders. He is the one following orders. He has no choice. Bucky literally can't use his critical analysis skills. No one is teaching him American history, and his brain gets wiped every 3 days. So I'll just read this last part off my notes because I said it so well. Much like how in the comics, Bucky is able to complete covert and dangerous missions without suspicion, his ability to sink beneath the surface of everyday surveillance and attention calls back to the corruption of political leaders like Richard Nixon. By positioning Bucky as a captive of American political officers, the film shows that American methods are not entirely different to Soviet methods and are lifted directly from Nazi methods. Both countries had their hands in the mud, trying to build a better world that best suited their interests with little regard to who it hurt. Bucky was at the intersection of that, helpless and alone, and he should in no way be condemned for those crimes. Oh, what was I just saying? Oh, that is it. Like I said, sound off in the comments. I'll put all of these links and everything that I can find in the description, and I'll put this document in the description as well, so you can just read through it. I don't know, where did the last 2 hours go? I don't know. Not actually entirely sure. I'm real and alive. Glad I could use all of my media skills to analyze this absolutely beautiful, fantastic, amazing movie that I just love so much. And honestly, I might go watch it. I won't, because I hate watching things that aren't 14 hours of YouTube straight. But it is seriously one of the most affecting pieces of media I have ever seen. And it heralded a new turning point in my life. Do I have any more thoughts? Yeah. Shove it up your ass. Kick ass, take names, eat pussy.